Last few years, most of the entire colleges are relying on the international students as a revenue stream just to keep their lights on. In some of the schools in Ontario, especially, 60% of the revenue comes from these international students. And it is not from the domestic students who are the locals to this country or the province. This is not a conspiracy theory, it's a business model that they built on over the years. Today, I'm taking you through the Ontario's college boom and how the cracks started showing up underneath. If you rewind a bit back to 2010s, most of these colleges were pretty stable and were able to operate on its own without any reliance on the international students. So at that point in time, the government funding was a bit of a tight. It's not that they were getting a lot of funds from the government, but they were manageable. They were able to run their operations. They were able to run the college by recruiting staff to get people to install, to attract the domestic students to enroll into the programs that they would want to, and also cover the provincial needs in terms of delivering the put, which is the number of students getting into the workforce, all was going pretty well. But at one point in time, the domestic tuition fees was frozen, and this happened especially in Ontario, where affordability has become a problem. So eventually, what happened? The budget started shrinking, and the colleges had to look elsewhere to survive. That elsewhere has become the international students. If you ask me why, of course, most of them probably might have heard of this. International students pay about 3 to 5 times of the tuition fee as compared to our domestic student. So, with all of that re-strategizing, so the colleges started recruiting the students rapidly, aggressively, and mainly these students have come from countries like India, China, Nigeria, and Philippines. While there are some students who might have come from the parts of South America, but still, predominantly, these are the countries which contributed to a large set of international students. For Ontario, or even for other provinces for that matter, you see large set of population, or the percentage of contribution would be from India, China, and related countries. And this would surprise you. In less than a decade, Ontario's student population has increased by 500%. And this did not happen just in the large cities, but also in the small cities within Ontario. But this is how the business model operated and worked well for those institutions in Ontario. They started getting into the public private partnerships. When you say private and public partnership, basically means the public institutions are giving those licenses to the private institutions to operate, run the operations, means primarily finding a facilities to get the students onboarded, hire the instructors to deliver the program. Then public institution would have the curriculum developed and into the private institutions, and they run the operations. But the fees is something that the public institutions used to the students and then transfer it to the private institutions just for logistical and other operational aspects of it. The one thing that majorly missed was these partnerships were lacking that connection to the community, which is important and critical in a country like Canada. All that they've tied is to the financial needs. For example, a small town college has about 5,000 students in locations like Brampton. And the Brampton campus enrolls about 10,000 international students, and suddenly that small town has become a global tuition factory. Here's exactly how the cracks started to show up. These campuses started filling up quickly, but the support systems like healthcare, housing, all of them were not ready for them. And whoever has come into this country, especially the students, started finding that struggle to find a house to live in, to get it rented, and then get into the colleges to study and also tried finding jobs. And the jobs on the other side were also scarce. Means typically international students are permitted to work 20 hours, and this is a known fact. And a lot of people come with hope that yes, I can go to this country, study, and as well as work for up to 20 hours to probably earn some money for my pocket expenses or pay the rent or save it for the next year's tuition fee or whatsoever it is. And a lot of these students or the colleges or the universities need to have mental support system, right? But with that influx of students who entered into this country or into those colleges, the mental support systems were inadequate. And whoever got the opportunities with those relaxation in terms of rules, where at one point in time, IRCC allowed students to work up to beyond 20 hours as well. Time hours basically, some worked 40 hours, some worked even more than that, just to make use of that policy relaxation to to get some more dollars and pay the tuition fees or recover some expenses or whatsoever. While all of this is happening, then the federal cap has come up in 2024 and things have started getting unraveled. And you start seeing those colleges who have had a lot of international students' contribution started canceling their programs, shutting down the campus locations. And eventually, what happened? The staff started getting laid off because there are no more international students, or there are less international students comparatively. Then, obviously, there is no need of much of a staff to exist. And also, at one point in time, I think students were in a kind of limbo situation whether they will be able to finish their program as their study schedule or not, because they were in kind of with all of this policy changes and the layoffs that are happening in their institutions. What has started as a funding crisis eventually got into a trust crisis because of all these colleges in Ontario. Let's understand why it happened, because it's not a surprise. Experts have warned for years the kind of model that the colleges started getting into is not sustainable, because you can't build a public education system by relying on international tuition, and you can't ignore the infrastructure based by chasing the enrollment numbers. But of course, they agree or disagree, and Ontario colleges didn't have a choice, and they had to look at their strategy, and they found a way to get on to international students, because Ontario has the lowest per student funding in Canada. And these colleges were asked to do more with less of the funding that they received from the provincial or any support from the federal for that matter. They did typically what an underfunded institution might do, and they built a kind of a survival model, and it worked until it didn't. So, who is paying the price now? Answer is almost everyone. The colleges, especially the faculty and the staff, felt the burnout because of the layoffs or whatever the policy changes that are happening. And the international students who come with high hopes, thinking that, okay, I can go study and probably secure a good job and eventually get a permanent residency to settle in that country to get that quality of life. But all those hopes were deteriorated. And the communities as well are impacted because they were overwhelmed, because might have not seen that influx of students in those communities coming in renting, or they were at point in time they were apprehensive that the culture is being overtaken and a lot of things that are happening around. And also started losing that confidence because they have not seen it as education anymore. They've seen it like it's a business. Definitely, Ontario's colleges gave Canada a global reach, but not a real safety net. And this has become more like a cautionary tale for other provinces and also the other countries who are in the similar model, relying on the international students. And today, I'm going to highlight about three takeaways. When you say it's a public education, it should be publicly funded, period. And international students come with a lot of hopes. They should not be treated or looked as revenue streams. They should always be looked as only learners who come with their high aspirations into the country to learn a thing or two, right? And when you talk about fast growth, obviously it won't be sustainable. And that too, without any proper planning, it would eventually lead to collapse. And that's exactly what happened in this scenario as well. And today, I'm not just trying to point fingers at a specific province or a specific college as such. This is only to introspect and ask those right questions, because this today we are where we are because of whatever happened in the past, right? While one good thing is Ontario's colleges have certainly adapted, if you look at on the positive side of it, but they were adapted into a broken funding model, which is not sustainable in the long run, which would do no good to anybody. Yes, short term, it's definitely a good benefit for them to get that money from the international students and cover any sort of expenses or any sort of infrastructure plans that they might have had, because they couldn't do that earlier because they didn't have money yet, or they had to look at funding prospects elsewhere. But now we know that is not something that is be relied on in the long term as a strategy. If we want our colleges to focus on learning, shouldn't we build our systems that support that mission instead of pushing them to act like corporations? And here, international students deserve more, and the domestic students deserve better. And frankly, if you ask me, Canada's education system deserves a rethink.